The work of helping people change their lives is amazing work. And the Power of People work was created because of a call that came from Ruth Stadheim from Faribault Prison. And the call came to my husband, and she asked my husband, Brother Shane Price, if he would come and if he would meet with a group of African American offenders who wanted a couple of things. First of all, they wanted to hear from other men, African American men, about what it means to be successful, what it means to be empowered, what it means to live a good life. And the second thing that she wanted was she wanted to reduce recidivism because of the revolving door that so happens with men who are incarcerated. You go in, you come out. You go in, you come out. So she wanted to help decrease that rate. So she invited my husband up to Faribault, and he went up and he did a workshop. After the workshop, she came back and she said, they loved it. They loved you. Come back. So one morning, as we were sitting, a Saturday morning, as we were sitting, he having coffee, me having tea, we were talking about what we could do. Broadly, what could we do as a way of impacting this whole notion of reducing recidivism, and as a way of helping men who are incarcerated, women who are incarcerated, change their lives. Can you change your life? Can you really do that? And we believe that you actually can. And we have evidence, and we've seen it over and over again now in these now going on 7 years, and having impacted over 3,000 offenders in Faribault, Lino, Rush City, and Moose Lake. Are you all from Minnesota? Who is not from Minnesota here? Excellent. Where are you from?
Iowa.
Iowa? Where in Iowa?
Southeast.
Southeast, like?
Iowa City.
Iowa City. Iowa City is good. Iowa City. How about you? San Diego, California. Great, great. How about you? Bismarck, North Dakota. All right? Now, in Iowa and San Diego, I know about Minnesota because we've been around Minnesota, right? In Iowa, San Diego, and Bismarck, are there men and women in your prisons who want to change their lives? Absolutely. So it's what? It is something that every human being has in them and wants to do. Now, years before my husband went and did the workshop at Faribault, I had written a book. And we call it the Little Purple Book That Did. Okay? And it's because it's a little purple book. And this little purple book, which is called The Power of People, 4 Kinds of People Who Can Change Your Life. Now let me just say, if you haven't read this book for yourself, look at the person next to you and say to them, have you read the book? Okay? Good. If you haven't read the book for yourself, get the book and read it for yourself, right? Because this little book says some very, very important things that we'll talk about a bit later, but it basically was a tool. When my husband said, well, how about if we use the little purple book, The Power of People, as a way, as a foundation to build a curriculum around, to build a program around for our men. And I said, that's a great idea, and that is literally how this work got started, right? With a group of 35 men, a little purple book, and a man with a heart to help other men change their lives. And that is how the Power of People Reentry Initiative actually started. I'm going to show you what's in your packet, and then we're actually going to kind of simulate the work that we do with you here in the room, all right? So in this packet, you have our brief history, which I just told you, and Ruth Stadheim should be here pretty soon. We see her as a partner with us in this work, and we're really thankful that she was open to just going for it. You see our program strategies here, which are basically providing 2 things at the same time. And it's, you know, in music you have surround sound. Our program has become a surround sound effect on for our men who have been incarcerated. One is that it is a pre-release program. So there's a whole process related to pre-release, and let's go to page, for you, it would be page 3. Page 2 gives what the programs are, what the goals are, and how we implement them. But I'm just going to give you the core components on page 3 here. The pre-release consists of 2 main classes. Now, my background is I'm a professor and a writer and a researcher and a teacher. So in designing our courses are designed like college courses. And our students have to write, they have to think critically, they have to integrate information, and they have to connect it to not only their now life, but their life that they want to have outside of the prison as well. And so the 2 courses are very intense, and they are required to do homework every week. And they're required to read every week. And they don't graduate unless they do their homework and they read and they demonstrate that they're really getting it. And we can tell when they're getting it and when they're not, right? Because a teacher can't actually tell. Now, after they've done class 1, which is the power of people, then they go to class 2, which is the silent cry. And the silent cry is based on my second book, which is called The Silent Cry, dealing with subtractors in work and life. You'll find out who subtractors are in a moment. Then after that, one of the most beautiful things about our work that I appreciate is the whole leadership component. And that leadership component is when you finish the Power of People class and you finish the Silent Cry class, now you actually get to become a student teacher in the courses. So now you become a role model, mentor, teacher to the others in the group. Okay, in the class. And what's so interesting is that the class has moved beyond the class into the overall institution. So people can tell in the institutions who's in the Power of People program and who's not. For one thing, they stopped going to SEG. Big deal, right? That's a really big deal. So they're not the ones going to the hole anymore. They're not the ones who are the problem makers. No, they're actually the ones who are now being sought out for good advice and as a role model. And then, as they become a student teacher, as they prepare to come to the community, we're actually working with their case managers and with their parole officers to integrate the program into their release plans. So now you begin to tie the pre-release to the post-release. So you're not just, it's not just a program, it's really a way of becoming who you really want to be, which is, for us, a positive, productive person in your community. And when we tell our students that the only reason that they would ever go back to prison is to teach a Power of People class. That's it, right? No other reason that they would ever be back in an institution for incarceration. And then upon release then, they come straight to our Tuesday night group, which is a reentry group we have every Tuesday night led by my husband and one of our team leaders and key consultants and trainers, Brother Marvin Clark, right back there, Brother Marvin. And then we also now have our first reentry housing facility where our participants who have graduated from our programs can actually have housing as well. After that, the post-release process is everything from Tuesday night group, housing, and my husband has come up with a wonderful way to stay in contact with all of it's amazing. He's like the most amazing texting person you have ever known. He can text like nobody's business. And once we figured out texting, because some of our men cannot be on Facebook, so we use social media, Facebook, and we use texting as e-mentoring for our men. So they will text in their issues and they will, they'll call it in, they'll text it in to say, hey, this is going on, and he'll be texting those little thumbs. We're going to have to give his little thumbs like a vacation or something because he's just working it out, as he does the e-mentoring with them. And then we connect with key partners in the community with housing, employment, mental health services, health in general, family education, and so forth. So this is the whole program right here as you see it. Now, what's interesting about the work is that it's multidimensional. And so today you'll actually get a multidimensional feel of it. We just launched our first international site in Curacao, which is right next to Aruba, right next on top of Venezuela. in the Caribbean, and it was pretty amazing. And this picture is actually in the prison with some of the offenders and some of the staff members there where we did a class. This is what you just saw. This is what you just saw. And we are going to, right now, do a video. Then we're going to come back to a student panel where our students will actually talk with you about what it is that they have learned from the program. As this is coming up, because it takes a good 2 seconds for it to roll, are there any questions so far, or thoughts or comments? Does anyone in San Diego, in North Dakota, do you have anything like this that's going on in your work right now? Not that you know of, okay? And as this is starting, Miss Ruth Stadheim just came in the room. Miss Ruth, I just talked about you. Okay.
Because they a lot of times at this facility have younger offenders, and where we can impact younger men, I just wouldn't let that opportunity, pass by if we had it. Today, though, throughout the hotel here, we're having workshop upon workshop, and they're probably all very important. But one of the things that I think happens with this kind of thing is that we don't often hear about outcomes. What happened on the other side of all of that? And is it stand up? Is it working? Is it transferable? And so today we have 4 of our graduates from our training inside of the Minnesota State Correctional Facilities, and I want to introduce them to you. And this, with our 4 guys come up, this is Brother Willie Lloyd right here. Give him a hand. Brother John Vane. Come on, Nate. Brother Nate. Thank you, man, for coming. Each one of them is skilled and gifted, and they're all going to be pursuing post-secondary education. Each one of these men are extremely smart. And the other part that I think I want you to see here is that an unintended positive consequence of what we've done is provided men of different cultures from different backgrounds and talk to each other. What that has done, much to our surprise, is then cut through some of the penitentiary culture and the penitentiary language that offenders use to describe each other and themselves. Separating themselves out with a new language begins to put the pop community outside of the everyday operating penitentiary community. And I like that because they have to rely on each other. And as Nate just indicated in men's group on Tuesday nights, tonight, we'll be there tonight. We got 2 new guys coming home tonight. We need to be there for them. But what happens with it is that each one of these guys can use the language of the class to help support each other and to help hold each other accountable. And language of culture, not that it's not important, but it's not always helpful. And so it was important for my wife and I to share with you some of the powerful fruit from the labor of this project. Not only that, I have relationships with their families. And so we're starting to come in contact with one another. And then, as we saw in that video, for those children that these men will ultimately produce, some they already have and some's yet to come, we want to be able to impact the unborn in a positive way. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. I don't have to tell you about children of incarcerated parents. The undersecretary just mentioned the very same thing. We've added to our service component, hasn't started yet, but we're getting ready to go, and that is we've purchased a van. And then what we're going to be able to do is ultimately hire the right guy, pop guy, to drive our van and drive the families of incarcerated guys to the 4 institutions where we're located, so that we can try to keep that bond moving forward and do away with some of the negative data that we've learned from children of incarcerated parents who have no contact and no relationship. So we're adding that as a component. I'll say that. Thank you. You know, this is a short workshop and not a lot of time for us to get totally in depth, but I want to share one thing with you that I think separates us out from other programs, other projects, and that is that we don't really assume that our student knows what it is to be a man. And when I talk about man, I'm not just talking about man male, but I'm talking about mankind. I mean, I think in some cases we assume that there's some things already there that don't need to be touched on, but we don't assume that. And so underneath the 4 kinds of people that my wife mentioned briefly, that's this book. The hypothesis is that in life, you're only ever going to meet 4 kinds of people. You know, my wife is a brilliant woman. I used to try to argue her down. I say, honey, that's too simplistic. I mean, it's far more complicated than that. And I had all these reasons why her hypothesis was not going to endure or stand up. And then as I did, she just kind of just real patient with me. You know how men, you know how we can be. And she was real patient with me, like, you know, honey, just let me work with you a little bit. And ultimately, she got me to see her side. And then I bought into it totally. She says this, and I'll just run through it briefly. She says that in life, you're only going to meet these 4 kinds of people. Doesn't make any difference what nationality they are. Doesn't make any difference what color. Doesn't make any difference what their social, economic background is. Doesn't make a difference what their position in life is in terms of job or title. But that you're only going to meet 4 kinds of people. An adder is someone who cares about you, who's willing to hold you accountable. This is what you're hearing here. Willing to hold you accountable and sometimes bring up things that you don't want to hear to support that. A subtractor, she says, is an individual who for some reason is always trying to pull you off your square, always trying to get you busy doing something besides what you're supposed to be doing. Anybody got somebody like that in their family? She says a multiplier, though, is a unique individual who lives life on another level, on another plane, is always watching, but you don't see him. She talks about multipliers being 2 types. An escalator multiplier who appears. Multipliers only mess with adders. They see through mess. They've already been somewhere. They've been down the line of life. That's an old railroad term. They've been down the line and they see some things. So a lot of times you can't put stuff over on multipliers. They've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. And so multipliers are looking only for adders. And when multipliers pull adders in, they either pull them through an escalator, step by step, or they pull them at an elevator, right up. I was just thinking about, you know how sometimes we see our young men and even our women who are gifted athletically. And right out of sometimes even high school or college, and sometimes they get brought right up an elevator to becoming like this millionaire and, you know, all of this and all of that. But then often we see that that doesn't always turn out the way we want it to, the way they wanted it to, right? Because they weren't prepared. They didn't have a foundation to rest any of that success on. We believe that too. She says that a divider, though, this is a dangerous individual. Drama follows him or her. There's always something happening with them. They're in a great deal of pain. They're not looking for help. and they want you to feel it too, and they will use you. Dividers have a way, she says, of walking up on you and getting to know you and learning your information and figuring out where your weak points are, but then right at the right time, a divider knows how to use that information against you to get where he or she is trying to go. That is the premise. That's the operating hypothesis of the power of people, and it's what we built our training around. But in the last few minutes of this workshop, I want to show you something I think separates us out. Because again, we don't assume, I'm back to that point, we don't assume that we understand what it means to be a man. And so if you put education on top of a particular level of ignorance, it doesn't have a way of rooting itself correctly. We say in our class, in our training, that mankind has 5 unique parts. 5 parts of self. This is a very old training. It's nothing that we created, but very, very ancient. And we researched it quite a bit. And the 5th part, I'll start there, is the part that you heard Will talk about. The 5th part of the 5 parts of self is the tribal self, or the worldly self. The tribe or the world. It's what we ultimately present out, what we project about ourselves, right? That makes good sense, I think. The 4th part is our personal self, or our persona. Our persona, or our personal self. This kind of is a combination of what we learned from wherever we learned it, that we then use to suggest to people who we think we are. Clothing, language, all those things go into making, and others go into making up our persona, right? So we say that the persona, in some ways, is the 4th part of self. This is the 5th, this is the 4th. Now, what sets that persona up, we say, is the environmental self. The environmental self, that's where you picked up all of these habits. That's where where we were all born in a particular geographical location, to a particular house, to a particular family. We have a choice over that, right? And so we grew into some things. I was just talking to a friend or brother the other day about his struggle with alcoholism. And he said, I asked him a question. I said, when did you first have your first experience with alcohol? He said that it was at age 11 that he took his first drink at his grandmother's house. And I walked him back a little bit, right, Marcus? And I said, I bet you it wasn't at age 11. I bet you had your first experience before that. See, because if you're around drinkers, even though you're not drinking, they're creating for you the theology, the thought that drinking's okay. Right? And so drinking to inebriation, drinking to, unconscious, of drinking obsessively every day, all the time, is okay. That's what we do. So in the 3rd part of self, we begin to normalize certain types of behavior. All of us do this. And in that normalized behavior, we run up to a number 6. A number 6 is what? Habits. So when your normalized behavior, learned environmental behavior becomes a number 6, becomes a habit, it has the ability then to take over the direction of your life and alter it. We say that the 2nd part of yourself is your physical self, your body. what you were born into, the physical self, the tool that is used, the thing that we come to associate with Nate, the thing that we come to associate with Marcus, the thing that we come to associate with John or Willie, the tool, but that's not who you are. You are inside of that tool. And so we build on this teaching, we build on this training with our men, and that we say inside of you, the first part of yourself is called your ba, the soul and spirit of you. The very soul and spirit of you. Think for me, because in some cases people believe that this is kind of ethereal, but if you ever had a hurt, this is just ever had a hurt, make you understand it. If you ever had a hurt, not just a normal hurt, but where something happened and it seemed to pierce all the way down to the soul. You could literally feel something coming out of you. The pain was so great. The joy works the same. Where you could be so elated, something could be so beautiful and so powerful, you feel it beyond the level of your physical self, beyond the level of your environmental self, beyond the level of your persona, beyond what the tribe thinks, what the world thinks about it. It's something so important to you, it's rooted there in your soul, makes that bell ring. The very soul and spirit of you, this is where your power lies. Inside of the soul and spirit. Let me explain it this way. All of us got here, or most of us did, through automobile or airplane. Inside the automobile is a battery, but you don't see that. Right? The car could have all kinds of bells and whistles, could do all kinds of fantastic things. But if it doesn't have any power in the battery, none of that pretty looking stuff is going to operate. None of it is going to function. The ba operates like the battery. It comes fully loaded with enough power. When we get a car, we buy a new car, it says on the speedometer 150, 140, 160. Mine says 160, 120. What they're saying is, what the manufacturer is saying is, I've given you the battery powerful enough to operate this vehicle at 160. Now, you never go 160, but the potential for it is resident inside of the automobile. In some cases, we never broke out of that environment. We were trapped into a normalization, but the potential for breaking out is already resident inside of the individual. I'm not just talking about you all. The potential to get to the next level, whatever that next level is for you. To be a better parent, to go for another degree, to move into a leadership position. Because your boss is a subtractor. I just threw that in. But this is true, right? But the power for that is inside. And when you begin to ask yourself for what you need, it begins to destroy what we now are calling a welfare state of mind. We're waiting around for somebody else to come. We have a saying in Pop, and the saying is, we are the help that we've been waiting for. Nobody else is coming. That saying seems to resonate with thousands of men. And I can't tell you what it feels like to get a letter from a parent who I don't know, who had to look through the internet or someplace else to find us, but who's written and said, I don't know what you're doing to my boy, but whatever it is, I thank you for it. And it happened one time, then again, and then again, and then again, and over now. It's not a coincidence anymore. And I was saying to my wife on the way over here, how grateful, I guess, that I am and appreciative that we get an opportunity to serve at the level that we serve at. We don't do that alone. Right behind you is Mr. Marvin Clark, who's my co-facilitator at the Lionel Lakes facility just further north here, and also is an employment specialist in finding ex-offenders employment. We have a partnership with his organization. That's where our Tuesday night group meets strategically, so that all of our men, pop guys, who normally come through when they come out into that environment with a different attitude. They're on something different. We have close to 100% employment. I'm not making this stuff up. We have, the reason why we don't have 100% employment right now, because some guys are so fresh that they have to go through the orientation process. We have stumbled up. Former commissioner, assistant commissioner Chris Bray said to me one time, she said, "Shane, you all have sat here and figured it out." And I didn't completely get what she was talking about when she said that. That was about 3 years ago she said that. But I had lunch with her the other day, and I commented to her, "Chris, now I think I know what you mean." Because sometimes when you're in it, you really can't objectify. But then we stepped back. We left the country and went into another prison just right off the coast of Venezuela, an international port. The CIA is there, they're armed. Border Patrol is there, they're armed. Immigration is there, they're armed. The police are there, they're armed. The guards, the whole thing. They asked us to come and train guards. And we said, "Yeah, we'll come, but not if you don't bring some of the offenders." And so what you saw there was them allowing not only us to bring offenders, but they also allowed us to bring the iPad in to capture it. You know, we can't have that in our system. I'm going to stop right there, and some of what we've explained to you today is laid out in the packet that you have. We have an interest in growing our project outside of the state of Minnesota and in the nation. So we're interested in Bismarck, North Dakota. We're interested in San Diego. We're interested in these other locations in Sioux City, Iowa. We're interested in trying to see if there's a way that we can work together in some ways for that.